Now I want to talk a little bit about these groups, these Jewish Dominionist groups. Let's start off with the ones whose motto was left behind at the scene of the crime. So at the Dawabsha family home, the arsonists, the murderers, left their calling card. They graffitied on the wall, Yechi HaMelech HaMashiach, long live the king, the Messiah. Okay? Now this isn't a random phrase. It wasn't, they didn't come up with it from their own imagination. This is actually the motto of perhaps the most powerful, or at least one of the largest and most powerful Jewish religious sects in the world, Chabad. You may know of them here in Montreal. They may be operating on McGill campus. I can't say, I've only been here for a couple of hours, but certainly they're very active across the country and around the world. We see posters all over Israel, signs, graffiti, Yechi HaMelech HaMashiach. We go down to the US, we see that there's no small amount of political power that they've accrued over the decades. Here they are meeting with Ronald Reagan in the Oval Office, going as far back as the 80s. George H.W. Bush, Clinton, George W. Bush, and Obama. Now when we look to the writings of the spiritual leader of Chabad, the messianic figure, Menachem Schneerson, and when we read the book of Tanya, which is like their religious manifesto, their foundational text, we see what they have to say about non-Jewish people. And they write, "The souls of the nations of the world emanate from unclean spheres which contain no good whatsoever. The Jewish body looks as if it were in substance similar to bodies of non-Jews, but the difference is so great that the bodies should be considered as completely different species." I'm no biologist, but I'm pretty sure I don't belong to the species Homo sapiens judaicus. I'm pretty positive we have the same DNA as everyone else in the room, but according to Chabad, we are different species. But they go on to say an even greater difference exists in regards to the soul. Two contrary types of soul exist. A non-Jewish soul comes from three satanic spheres, while the Jewish soul stems from holiness. Now, it's not only in the United States that they have political power, also in Israel when they meet with Netanyahu, he has on his skull cap, on his kippah, the same motto, Yechi HaMelech HaMashiach, but he isn't even their favorite political operative in Israel. They much prefer Netanyahu's challenger to the right, because also in Israel, there are internal elections in the different political parties, and the ruling Likud party, Netanyahu is challenged from the right consistently by Moshe Feiglin. This is someone who last summer, while death was raining down on Gaza, he went public with his opinion: the IDF, the Israeli army, shall designate certain open areas in which the civilian population will be concentrated. Subsequent to the elimination, Gaza will become part of Israel and will be populated by Jews. So open calls for ethnic cleansing. This is the man that the Chabad movement flies around the world, here in Canada, down in Australia. You invite him to speak in their synagogues and community centers. Of course, we don't even need to go to the political realm. We can stay in the religious realm, because Chabad also has operatives in Israel, and their top Chabad rabbi, Yitzhak Ginsburg, he's famous for authorizing the King's Torah. I'll just say a couple words about this book if you haven't heard of it. This is a book that came out a few years ago. It was published in Israel. And it's essentially, I'm sickened to say, it gives me no pleasure to report, it's essentially a Gentile murdering manual. It's a theological treatise in which this rabbi, a state-sponsored rabbi, I might add, on the public payroll, paid by my tax money. And he has a hypothesis. What circumstances is a Jew allowed to kill a non-Jew? This is the question that the book asks. And he comes to the conclusion that under pretty much any circumstance, he writes, there is justification for killing babies if it is clear they will grow up to harm us. he publishes this book, and Yitzhak Ginsburg, this top Chabad rabbi, is the one that gives it the asmachta, the seal of approval. He writes the introduction. He says, yes, this follows all the rules of halakha, of Jewish law. This complies with Jewish law and is an authoritative, source of wisdom. So this is the ideology that Chabad is putting its stamp of approval on. Killing babies, okay? And then someone inspired by their ideology actually goes out and burns babies. Okay, this is what we've come to. Now my question is, why haven't you heard about this? Why are you hearing about this for the first time? Why do I have to come all the way over from Israel and explain this to you and burn up all these fossil fuels? Where is the mainstream media? Why don't you already know this? Why is no one criticizing Chabad? Chabad isn't criticizing itself. Since this happened, do you think that they looked inward and said, oh my goodness, people acted after being inspired by our writings, and they went out and they burned a baby, maybe we should rethink things? If you go to the Chabad websites, you'll see they don't even say, forget, maybe we need to look inward. They don't even acknowledge that Jews did it. Okay, even though they left the graffiti at the scene of the crime, on their websites, they're pushing a conspiracy theory that maybe it was Palestinian people themselves, and that they forged this graffiti. Even the Israeli government acknowledges that it was Jewish supremacists who did it, but Chabad is so unwilling to even, examine its own role and culpability in this kind of, sickening murder that it's willing to entertain these ideas of conspiracy. Now, I don't mean to suggest that this is all religious sects of Judaism. Far from it. In fact, that family, the Dawabsha family, with the mother, father, and the 1-year-old baby who were taken, there was a surviving member of the family, 9-year-old Ahmed, and at first it wasn't clear whether he was going to survive or not because he suffered burns in 90% of his body. But while his life lay in the balance, this man, a rabbi in Israel, the head of the Reform movement, a liberal stream of Judaism, the Reform movement in Israel, he actually organized an interfaith prayer session. He brought Muslim imams and Christian priests and himself a Jewish rabbi, and outside of the hospital where Ahmed Dawabsha was recovering from his wounds, they held a prayer session, an interreligious prayer session, and he spoke at that prayer session. He had something very interesting to say. He said, those doing price tag attacks, here he's referring to these racist hate crimes of Palestinians. Price tag is the euphemism used in Israel to describe these. So those doing price tag attacks are doing real Jewish acts, just as we are doing Jewish acts here by praying for the life of Ahmed Dawabsha. In the Jewish writings, you can find humanistic writings next to dark ideas, and the two are the two faces of Judaism. Until we understand this, we won't be able to fight for the leading voice of Judaism. It's not that those who carry out hate crimes are a distortion of Judaism and that we are the true Judaism. No, it is a struggle between two options of Judaism.